take care of. I'd like to call the meeting to order in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231. Adequate notice of this regular meeting of the Board of Adjustment of the Township of Franklin has been provided. Call the roll, please.
Laura Grauman, Donald Johnson, Bruce McCracken,
Here.
Alan Rich. Robert Shepard asked to be excused this evening. Anthony Caldwell.
Here.
Gary Rosenthal.
Here.
Joel Reese.
Yeah.
Cheryl Bergallo asked to be excused this evening, and Chairman Thomas.
Here. Resolutions or discussion vouchers. Marion Callahan and Blair Chinese Center Incorporated, 818 is our motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carried. Hearings, Surinder and Rano Singh, ZBA 17-00020, hardship variance in which the applicant is seeking a variance due to his going 1,070 square feet over the previously approved impervious coverage, 3 Buell Street, Somerset, Block 83, Lot 1.04, in Zone R20, carried to September 6th, 2018, with no further notification. Meridian Developers, ZBA 18-00007, applicant proposes demolishing the existing buildings and constructing a two-story apartment building with 14-space parking lot at 52 Norma Avenue, Somerset, Block 234, lots 2 and 8, in the OP zone. That's carried also to September 6th, no further notification. Right now, the one hearing on the agenda to be heard, Gennaro Constable and Jax Gennaro, ZBA 18-00004, use variance and site plan with variances in which applicant will convert a two-story dwelling on lot 16 into a restaurant, construct a small one-story addition between the structures on lots 16 and 17 at 6 Laurel Avenue and 4585, 4587, Route 27, Kingston, Block 3, lots 14, 16, and 17 in the NB zone. Okay. Maybe you can give us benefit of your thoughts on this. We have a 5-person board, obviously.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Peter Lanford, 3000 Hadley Road, South Plainfield, New Jersey, appearing on behalf of the applicant. I am aware that there are only 5 members here this evening. There is a D variance that we are seeking in conjunction with this application. At this point in time, I'd like to proceed with the presentation of my testimony. At the end of the evening, I can make a determination along with my client as to whether we want to call for a vote this evening or we may want to defer the vote until some additional members can review the, I guess they're either reviewing the video or the paper transcript of the hearing.
Okay, you're
Mr. Mielek is setting up because we're going to work off of your wonderful system, so I have Mr. Mielek setting everything up, so we'll be ready to commence shortly.
I turned everything on.
Get 'em?
The other problem, Mr. Thomas, my traffic consultant is not here yet either,
I
so.
saw her go by.
Oh, she did.
She's here.
Oh, there she is.
As we speak.
Yes, she is here.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Again, Peter Lanford on behalf of the applicant. This is a fairly straightforward application for the connection of two buildings along Route 27 and to construct parking to service those buildings. By way of history, my client, the applicant, purchased the property on lot in 2016, purchased the property which is to the right of his existing market. We were before the planning board about 3 years ago when he purchased the market. We received a site plan approval for the market. The building adjacent to him became available. He purchased that building. This application is to build a connection between the two buildings and to use the building that he recently purchased for a restaurant. The other piece of property that is part of this application is a piece of property that fronts on Laurel Avenue. My client purchased that also within the last year and a half. That property contains upon it a 4-family dwelling. We are not proposing any changes to the dwelling. That property is a non-conforming use because it is still in the business zone and it is a residential use. And since we are going to be using that property for egress and for parking on a shared parking arrangement, technically it becomes a D variance that we're seeking for that. That's the basics of the application. I will call Mr. Costabile to go over how this all is going to work.
Could you raise your right hand?
Yes.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
I do.
Your name and address, please.
My name is Gennaro. Good evening, everybody. My name is Gennaro Costabile. I live on 36 Union Street, Kingston, which is a Princeton address. I've been a resident of Kingston since 91. Oh, I'm sorry. I've been a resident of Kingston since 1991.
Okay, you can sit down now. I'm going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Costabile, you heard my opening comments, is that correct?
I did, yes.
You know, and about 3 years ago, you purchased a property which was at one time a barber shop and other uses, and at the time you purchased it, it was a vacant piece of property, correct?
Correct.
And we came to the planning board and received site plan approval to use that property for a market.
We did, yes.
And the market itself has how many seats in it currently?
15.
Okay. And what are the hours of operation in the market?
We open 7 days a week, Monday to Sunday, obviously. Close at 7 o'clock in the evening. Saturday, Sunday, and Monday we close at 5.
Okay. And while you were operating the market, the property next door became available, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and that property was owned by an attorney?
It was, yes.
And that attorney received a use variance in 1987 for the use of that property for her law office, did she not?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And she, I guess, retired and you bought the property?
I did.
Okay. And you also purchased the property that fronts on Laurel Avenue?
I did.
Okay. And when you purchased that property, and today that is a 4-family dwelling?
It's a 2-bedroom apartment, yes.
Each of them has 2 bedrooms?
Yes.
Okay. When you purchased the properties, the property that had the law office on it, there's a driveway next to that property takes it to the rear of that property, correct?
That's correct.
And that's a driveway from Route 27?
Correct.
Okay, and as part of her approval, there was parking in the back of that property, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and the apartment building that you currently have has parking on it?
It does.
How many parking spaces are currently there?
8.
Okay, are they marked out and striped, or are they just?
No, they're not.
Okay. with respect to the restaurant that you propose to finish and occupy the building, how many seats are you proposing in the restaurant?
Total 45, including the market.
So 30 seats in the restaurant?
Correct.
Now, how long have you been in the restaurant business?
A long time, since almost 40 years.
Okay, and have you had restaurants in this general area?
I did.
And can you tell the board where you operated restaurants?
I opened up a restaurant in Hillsborough in 1995. I operated that until 2005. I had a place in a restaurant in Princeton on Route 206 since '99. We recently closed that in last year because they put a gym on the second floor. You know the story, but I don't know if the members, the board is interested to hear about that.
Okay.
And I operate a cafe in Plainsboro in a pharmaceutical building.
Okay.
So we do caterings, we do a variety of
Okay,
services.
And the restaurant that you are proposing in the building on Route 27, in essence, is a replacement for the restaurant that you had in Princeton?
It is a reincarnation. You know, the one in Princeton, we had 75 seats.
And would you consider it a fine dining restaurant?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, and most of the customers, you would have to have reservations, given the fact that you have only 30 seats in that building and 15 in the other, especially on the weekends, it would be reservations only?
It would be reservation only, yes.
Okay, now, the building that you currently have has, where you have the market is the kitchen, has a kitchen in it,
It does.
and that's where you do the cooking.
Yes,
And you will be doing the cooking for the restaurant in that same kitchen.
that is correct.
You are not proposing to construct a new
No.
kitchen. And you are proposing to connect the two buildings?
Yes,
Okay, and in connecting the two buildings, that's just for the wait staff to be able to go from the kitchen to the new building, is that correct?
correct, yes.
That connection does not have public access, is
No.
that correct? The current market is handicap accessible, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
Okay, and also the restroom facility in the current market is handicap
very
accessible?
free, yes. Mhm.
The building that you are converting is not handicap accessible?
correct.
Okay. So that if someone is in a wheelchair, they cannot access the new building, but they do have access to a restaurant in the existing building?
That's correct.
Okay, in the new building, besides creating the connection between the two buildings, are there any other changes that you are proposing in the new building?
No,
Are you proposing restrooms in the new building?
we are adding one extra bedroom.
So the new building will have restroom facilities, 2 restrooms in the new building?
Correct.
Okay. Now, in the original application, and when the property was occupied as a law office, there was an apartment upstairs?
Correct.
Okay. And that apartment was a non-conforming use, it wasn't permitted by ordinance, correct?
Correct.
And when we made our development application, we were going to keep the apartment, is that correct?
Correct.
And after thinking about it and given the issue with the parking, we have decided not to use the upstairs for a residence, correct?
Correct.
And that will be used for offices?
Only offices, yes.
Okay, and those are offices for you in running your businesses? They're
Right.
not offices that you would lease out to third parties, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, if the board approves the application, what would be the hours of operation of the new restaurant?
The hours of operation will be generally 5 to 9,
So
6 days a week.
Okay, so it'll be 5 PM to 9 PM?
Correct.
And there will not be any lunch served in the
No.
new restaurant? Okay. Now, if you go past your place at the present time, you have a couple of tables in front of the existing market.
Correct.
You also have some tables and chairs in front of the house that you're going to be converting.
Correct.
Okay, and what are they used for?
Well, somebody buys a sandwich, they go outside and they sit down, you know, they have a sandwich, they go home,
Okay,
just for their pleasure.
for convenience.
Correct.
And you are not intending to use any of those outside seating spaces for the restaurant?
No.
Okay, so all of the dining for the restaurant will be within the confines of the two buildings, which are going to be combined into one building, correct? Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Anything from the board?
Aaron, just one question on the number of seats. So you had said that there are 30 in the new restaurant and 15 in the existing deli. Is that
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay. The architectural plans, when you count up the number of seats, there's 34 in the restaurant and 10 in the deli. Can you explain that?
I believe it was just the mishandling of the numbers, but the total numbers are 45.
Okay, but we're just trying to get
Yeah,
this,
it
because
is
we've been
15.
trying to get this correct for,
Yeah.
and
I
your
thought
testimony
Yeah,
is different
there's
than what.
currently 15 seats in
In the market, yes.
in the market. And it may be that you maybe move some of those seats into the restaurant next door and have less, correct?
Correct, yes.
But what we're seeking approval for is a combined total of 45 seats, whether they're in the market.
Because what's shown on the plan is 44.
Yeah,
Its plans show 34 and 10.
yeah,
I mean, and it shows in the market a 4-top and a 6-top, which is 10.
all right.
And then it shows 20 in the front room in the restaurant, 20 in the front room, 10 in the next room, and then a 4 in the back,
Right.
which is 34.
Right.
So
If-
again, we're just trying to make sure that
Yeah.
your testimony is consistent with the
The,
plans.
the max number, I mean, and I think it boils down to what the parking on a 3-to-1 ratio would be 45. I mean, we can move some from the market over to the other,
I'm just asking for what the right number is.
the number's 45 is a max.
Is it?
Okay.
I mean, if you wanted it
And in
44,
the restaurant, is it 34 or 30?
excuse me?
40.
30, okay. So you'll revise the plans to show 30, just trying to get to the right numbers here. So you'll revise the plans to show 30 seats in the restaurant?
There's 30 seats in the restaurant, yeah.
On the new restaurant, Peter, do you have any plans at all to make it handicap at all?
No, not at this time. I mean, part of the problem, that's not, I don't want to say it's a problem, part of it is the house has a lot of charm and character to it if you've seen it. And it, quite frankly, in order to put the ramps in, probably would destroy a lot of the character of the house. And since we do have the ability to service people with disability in the existing market, we felt that was the best way to go.
And both eating establishments, we will be serving at the same time, right?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
How can they be at this, unless you're gonna change the hours, but the market, where they have seen, do they have sandwiches and stuff?
I'm sorry, sir?
The market where you have the 15 seat,
Yes.
do they, when are the hours for the market?
Well, the market closes at 7 o'clock, but, we only serve lunch until 3 o'clock. But then in the 7 o'clock is generally speaking, people pick up dinners to take home. Not too many people sit down and have a late lunch at 5 o'clock.
Okay. I was just trying to make sure about the hours.
Sure.
Because the hours
Absolutely,
were.
absolutely. It's very good observation, sure. But most of the weekend hours, Saturday, Sunday, we close at 5. So during the week, we close at 7 for convenience of people that go to work and, most of the places close at 6 o'clock. We stay open until 7 for them to come in, take their dinners to take home. And so, and a little extra service.
Okay. We'll open at the end. For nothing.
There's any. Okay, Mr. Melick?
You raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Your name and address, please?
Christopher A. Mielek, 32 Broward Drive in Hillsborough.
Can you spell your last name, please?
Melick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Melick, what is your occupation?
I'm employed by Van Cleef Engineering. I'm a licensed land surveyor and licensed planner registered in the state of New Jersey. and I've testified before numerous boards, including this board in the past.
Okay.
Okay, and you're presenting testimony both for planning purposes and also to describe the plan.
Yes,
And the plan was prepared by your office under the direction of Mr. Ford, and you assisted him with the development of this plan?
yes,
Okay, and the plan that is before the board this evening is about the third iteration of this plan. We had made a submission, we met with the town, we revised it, and we then had subsequent meetings, and then revised it again. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay. Can you bring up on the screen the existing conditions plan if you have it?
Yes, let me just get that up. This is the aerial, but this shows some proposed stuff too, so let me get to the existing. Okay, so this is the existing conditions plan.
Okay, and Mr. Malik, you're familiar with the property and have visited on numerous occasions?
Yes,
Okay, and you heard my opening remarks that at the present time, we have two buildings on two separate lots fronting on Route 27, correct?
yes, that is correct.
And can you indicate, you show the board where those buildings are so that they
Yes, so it's these, I'm going to zoom in a little bit on those. So this building right here is the existing market, and this building right here is the building that will be the proposed restaurant.
Okay, and in between the two buildings is a little sliver, almost a triangular piece,
Yes, right here.
and that is the addition that's connecting the two buildings, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and behind the existing market, what is currently located?
Behind the market right here is basically a driveway. It is a stone area. In this area here is stone, and behind the building where the restaurant will be located is existing brick pavers, and behind that is a stone area.
Okay. And then the third building that is part of this application is the building that fronts on Laurel Avenue, which is the four-family house, correct?
Yes, that's this house right here.
Okay, and that has its own ingress and egress on Laurel Avenue?
Yes, it does, right here.
And the area I guess, adjacent to the building is the parking area for
Yes.
that building?
Yes, this is the existing parking area here.
All right, and it's currently basically undelineated parking spaces?
That is correct.
Okay. Can you take us now to the proposed site plan? And maybe it'd be easier if we start with the aerial of the site plan, as I think you had it up before. Okay, that's an aerial of the subject property with the site plan superimposed?
Yes, yes. So the base map of this is the existing conditions map, and then the proposed conditions are superimposed on top.
Okay. And the existing four-family dwelling, since your arrow is on that lot, remains unchanged? There's nothing being proposed with respect to the dwelling, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And as you come into the property, when we submitted the plan, we now showed a driveway, a two-way driveway coming into the property, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And we also showed now delineated parking spaces on that lot?
Yes, right through here.
Okay, and how many spaces are there?
We have got, I'll count them out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, and there is also an additional parking space on that lot on the opposite side behind the house. That parking space is also part of the lot on which the house is located.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then you proposed to construct additional parking along the rear of what was the old law office, correct?
Yes, right in this area here.
Okay, and how many spaces are there?
We've got 4 spaces, a total of 5, but the one is on lot 14, so there's 4 lots on lot 16.
Okay, and then behind the market, how many spaces are we proposing to construct?
Okay, we have one handicap spot, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, total of 6.
Okay, and how many total spaces is that?
So we have 6, and we have the 5, I'm sorry, the 4, so we have 10. We have 10 spaces in this area here.
Okay, and the total parking spaces throughout the three lots?
It is 23.
Okay, and when we submitted the original plan, did we in fact have 2 additional parking spaces as part of our plan?
Yes, we did.
And can you show the board where we had the 2 additional spaces?
They were located right in this area here. So the maneuver for this traffic would have to kind of work its way around those spots. So those spots have been eliminated, and a section of fence that previously existed here has been removed.
Okay, and that was at the request of staff, so we then went down to 23 parking spaces.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the existing parking lot behind the house, is that blacktop?
Behind this house here?
Yeah. Or the parking lot where you have the 8 to 10 spaces?
This right here is existing pavement, yes.
It's all pavement. So, and the only thing that we're proposing on that parking lot is to stripe and delineate the parking spaces. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Are there wheel stops currently there where the parking spaces are located?
No,
And are we proposing to put any wheel stops there?
we are proposing that.
Okay. Now, behind the old law office, there looks like various materials on the ground at the present time. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And where your arrow is now, what's that?
This is like a decorative retaining wall that separates the parking area from kind of like a little patio in this area. The patio currently has tomato plants and basil plants.
That's shocking. Now, and the pavement behind that office is the existing pavement is what?
The existing condition here is stone,
Okay.
and it is proposed to be porous pavement in this
Okay.
area here.
And what about the area between the stone and the house? What's on the pavement there?
This area here?
No, I'm sorry, between this area and here.
This right in here?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the brick pavers, which that is proposed to remain as is.
Okay, so there are brick pavers that were used for the law office where vehicles would enter and they drive over those brick pavers, and that's where they park. We're keeping those.
Yes.
Okay, now behind the market, right now is gravel, and what are we proposing to do with respect to the area behind the market?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the site plan just to show that a little better. Because some of the pavement in that area will be regular pavement and some of it will be porous pavement. So, but the surface will all be pavement. The difference is that to mitigate the increase in runoff, this area here has been designed to infiltrate the runoff.
Okay, so right now, the area that is stone will be replaced with porous pavers.
That's correct.
Okay, and
Or porous pavement.
pavement. And in doing that, I guess it was Mr. Ford, had a meeting with Mr. Zelnick to review how stormwater management would be handled on the site?
Yes.
Okay, and the solution for stormwater management was porous pavement and also tying into an existing basin on the adjoining property. Is that correct?
Yeah, as far as tying in, any overflow would be directed to an existing drainage inlet located right here and right here.
Okay, and those drainage inlets are not on our property, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I'll get to how we get there in a second. Now, in addition to those improvements to allow for the parking, are there any other improvements that are being proposed to the rear of the property vis-a-vis lighting and/or landscaping?
There is landscaping proposed. Let me go to the landscape plan. Okay, so this is the landscaping and lighting plan. So there is proposed landscaping to help buffer the area between the parking and the residential property to the north.
Okay, and at the current time, is there in fact a solid white vinyl fence along that property line?
Yes, there is.
Okay, and then that solid white vinyl fence is owned by the adjoining property owner. It's not the applicant's fence, but it does basically separate the two properties, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then we would be supplementing or putting in some plantings along the rear of that property line, correct?
Right. Yes.
Are there any other plantings that are being proposed?
There are some, there's a tree here proposed, and some landscaping between the existing pavement, which is going to be utilized for parking, and the existing fence that's located just north of the property line for Lot 15.
Okay, and just for the record, where you're showing that area of a fence and some additional landscaping, the two properties basically to the east, I guess that would be east, fronting along Route 27, those are commercial properties, correct?
That is correct.
So the only abutting non-commercial property would be the residential property to the rear?
That's correct.
Okay. Are we proposing any lighting?
We are proposing some lighting. Let me just blow this up a little bit. So there is a light fixture proposed right here. There's another light fixture proposed right here, here, and here. So these are typical light fixtures that are on a post with the downward facing illumination.
And I think one of the staff reports indicated there was some minimal spillage, and that could be corrected, and the spillage would be contained on our property. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So that would be all of the lighting that would be proposed to the rear of the property. Correct, Mr.?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Now, have you had an opportunity to review, if I can find them, the staff reports that were generated in conjunction with this application?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and I think also this is the third round of staff reports. And there are some staff reports that indicate that they have no comments. I want to just briefly touch on the report that was based on the old submission from the police department dated May 22nd, 2016. And that was the report that recommended the removal of the 2 parking spaces.
Yes.
Okay, and it also requested the removal of the PVC fence, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and they also requested that we demonstrate sight lines for ingress and egress onto Laurel Avenue.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that intersection in a minute, but we can obviously do that.
Yes.
Now, with respect to the driveways, the initial circulation pattern that you had a 2-way entrance on Laurel Avenue, 1-way entrance on Route 27, and there is also at the very top of the site a connection with the adjoining property owner. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Right here.
Okay. And I think probably this is the appropriate time. I do have a letter that I'd like to mark as
A1?
as A1 from the owner of the adjoining property, which is a restaurant also. And that letter indicates that the gentleman is the owner of the adjacent lot. He's aware of our application, and that he is agreeable to granting a connection to the stormwater management system on our property, which obviously we will do by a formal easement, because I'm sure that's going to be a condition of approval. And he will also allow us to have access to the property and use the parking lot, and will lease to us 10 parking spaces. I do have a executed lease with no commencement date because we're not ready to use them, but it's a 10-year initial lease for those parking spaces. And can you indicate on this plan where those parking spaces would be?
It would be in this parking area on this property here.
Okay. And the adjacent parking lot, you're familiar with it?
Yes.
And how big is that parking lot?
It's a good-sized parking lot. I don't know if I have that on the exhibit or not. Let me see if I can.
I think Mr. Healy said it was huge. Actually, there was an application many years ago to build an office building to the rear of that property with the use of the same parking lot for an office building. So at this juncture now, there are actually 3 methods of getting on and off the site. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, one of the reviewers of this application is Somerset County.
Yes.
And that's because Somerset County, because Laurel Avenue is a county road.
That's correct.
Okay, and did they have any comments with respect to this application?
They did have some comments with regard to site distance, but also comments with regard to this existing drainage structure. I'll pull this up a little bit more. But there's an existing drainage structure in Laurel Avenue, and they have a concern because the widening of this driveway is positioned such that the drainage inlet will be located in the middle of the driveway, and they do have a regulation that prohibits drainage structures like this in the driveway area.
Okay, and have you had any meetings with the county concerning that structure?
Yes, we did. We actually had a field meeting. We even had the county open the manhole that's in Laurel Avenue because this manhole was very large and it was paved over. So when we surveyed the property, when Van Cleef surveyed the property, the surveyors were unable to open that because the pick holes were paved shut. So the county opened that up, and we were able to examine that structure so we could determine what would be needed to relocate this inlet. At that time, our thought was to relocate the inlet to the south and construct a new pipe that would connect to that manhole. And what our examination revealed was that that project would be much more involved than we envisioned. The condition of that manhole would require reconstruction of part of the manhole. The existing pipe would have to be removed, the existing drainage structure, and then a new pipe would have to be constructed. And then in addition to that, the way the pavement is sloped, a good portion of Laurel Avenue, from the edge of the pavement to the center line up to this area here, this area that I'm boxing out, would all have to be milled and repaved so that the low point would be relocated to the south.
And after going through that exercise and finding out the problems, did you discuss perhaps an alternative solution to that problem?
We did. So our thought was perhaps we could make this driveway a one-way driveway going out, eliminate the two-way operation, and by doing that, we wouldn't have to widen the driveway. We can keep the driveway in its current configuration and eliminate that need for all that construction in the county road.
Okay, so that would then eliminate one entrance, but would still have an exit onto Laurel Avenue.
Correct.
Okay, and then also in further compensation, since we have the ability to use the adjoining property, right now we had a one-way sort of designation for the connection between our parking lot and the adjoining property. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and perhaps it would, in looking at everything in total, since people would not be coming in off of Laurel Avenue to give them an alternative method of gaining access to the site, did you have a suggestion as far as opening up the driveway to the adjoining property owner?
In this area here?
Yes.
We did consider possibly making this, eliminating one parking space here to make this a little bit larger and perhaps make this a two-way operation.
Okay. And now with respect to the deliveries, have you been to the property when deliveries are being made to the market as it currently is operating?
Yes.
And when you were there, how did the delivery trucks access the property?
The delivery truck, let me go to I think the other drawing might be better. so there's an existing stone area. We have this paved parking lot here, and then an existing stone area that basically is straddled by the property line between the subject property and the adjoining property with the restaurant. And what the vehicle does is backs into this area, and he unloads the items to both properties at the same time. And then when he leaves, he leaves out through this parking lot and gains access to Route 27.
So most of the deliveries, whether they're either to my client's property or even to the adjoining restaurant, are basically being made through the wider driveway at the restaurant to the south of us.
Yes.
Okay. And when you were there,
Can I stop you there for, how does that going to work with this plan when half of that driveway is going to be made landscaping?
what do you, there's sufficient width for them to back into that?
Yeah, this area here would remain, so this whole area here is paved. And the area that's being landscaped would be just to the property line.
So the truck would basically back onto the property, back into the adjoining property?
So on this exhibit, you can kind of see this whole area is paved. And that'll remain that way.
Okay, do you have a ballpark for a width of that area?
I would say it's hard to scale off the drawing, but I would say it's, in this narrowest spot, 12 feet.
And then when they unload, they're going to walk over the landscaping?
I don't think we really thought about that, to be honest with you.
So we'll have to provide a connection?
Yeah, we'll have to provide a connection, but, perhaps even through this striped area, which generally wouldn't be parked in for the ADA spot. These deliveries are probably either hand-carried or wheeled in on a cart.
Oh, wait, not yet.
But I think that would be my suggestion there, to provide that as a connector, or perhaps in this area here. So what we'd probably do is make this, we would extend the pavement down so that deliveries can be made right there.
And the deliveries the deliveries, when they're delivered to the restaurant to the south of us, the delivery door is adjacent to our client's property, correct?
Yes.
And our deliveries come into the back corner of our property.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the engineering report from Mr. Thomas, basically, we have complied with everything we need to file a consolidation deed, because we're going to merge the two lots, which we're willing to do, and obviously we have to do a payment in lieu of some trees that we are not putting in, and the stormwater management, he indicates, has been addressed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and just for the record, the DOT has no interest in this application. Somerset County Planning Board, you testified as to what is going on with respect to them, and the Delaware Raritan Canal Commission, what's the current status of that?
I don't know if I have that report with me. I believe they accepted the design of the infiltration system with the porous pavement.
But they have not issued the final approval yet, because they can't issue the approval until such time as we have gotten approval by this board. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And any approval of this board would be conditioned upon approval of the Delaware Raritan Canal Commission, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Mr. Healy issued a report dated July 9th, 2018, and in the first page of the report, he describes the 3 lots in question, which are in fact going to be, 2 of them are going to be consolidated, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And both lots by themselves are undersized for the current zone, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And there are numerous bulk variances that exist because of the existing conditions of the 2 lots along Route 27 by combining these two lots, some of the conditions are going to be actually made better, and none of the conditions are going to be made worse regarding front yard, rear yard, side yard setbacks. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And with respect to the lot that has the house on it, we do need a D variance for that because we are using that parking lot for the, part of that parking lot for the restaurant, which technically is an expansion of the non-conforming use. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. With respect to the other variances that we are seeking, we have a driveway with variance. Can you indicate where that driveway with variance is?
That driveway with variance is right in this area here. So we have an existing condition, so this is an existing paved driveway, and part of it is the paver block driveway. There's also an existing fence that is along that property line, but slightly to the east of the property line. So the dimensions that are shown here are from the building to the property line, but there is actually a little bit more width that exists to the east of the property line.
And that's the narrowest point. As you go out toward 27, what is the width of that driveway?
The width increases to 12.6.
Okay.
Right near Route 27, and then it does increase again in the back here near the planter area.
So we have just one little pinch point at the end of the building and the adjoining property?
Yes.
So are the encroachments going to be removed or not? I mean,
The
plans are saying they're going to be removed, but the testimony seems like they're not.
The answer is, we had not had any communication, I was going to get to that, Mr. Healy, with the adjoining property owner who indicated he has no objection to leaving the encroachments in place. Is that correct, Mr. Costabile? So we will, again, have to reach an agreement with him and documentation showing that we will be allowed to keep the encroachment on that property.
And that is noted on the plan as well, right in this area here.
Now, with respect to the impervious surface variance, can you indicate what the zone requirement is for the impervious coverage and what we are proposing?
Yes, so the impervious cover requirement, so basically we have the three lots, and we're merging two of them. So in our table, we do summarize those coverages and the requirements. So the requirement for impervious cover is, I can barely read this, it looks like 80%. And so we are at 88% on the combined lots 16 and 17, and we are at 61.9% on lot 14. My thought is when you average that out about the whole site, we're at 76%.
So if you look at the site and this project in a totality of the circumstances, the impervious coverage of the two lots would be under the zone requirements. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Question, a little note about that. So the 88%, if you make that connection you talked about for the delivery, you're going to go up a few percentage points. So just protect yourself. I would think that would that make it maybe 90%?
Actually, I think what we would probably do to offset that, I don't think that's going to be a relatively small area in here. One thought was if we do make this a one-way driveway at Laurel Avenue, there is this pavement here that's shown to be widened out. So that would be eliminated. And another area that we could probably remove pavement if we had to is in this area right here. We can kind of straighten this out so it's a uniform aisle width. So I think there's a couple options there. So however we set this new pavement up for the connection for the deliveries, I think we can offset that in other areas.
So the offset may not be on the same lot, but I guess what we can indicate is that the percentage of impervious coverage with whatever modifications we make will not exceed what we're currently asking for, and there will be some sort of a reduction.
That's correct. During this moment of silence, I just want to, to note that I think I may have misspoken when I talked about the number of parking spaces. The number of proposed parking is 21. I said 23, so 23 are required, 21 are proposed.
We had 23 originally, then we took the 2 parking spaces out to get us down to the 21. And that does not include the 10 that we can use next door.
Correct.
Okay.
While you're talking about parking, will it be identified spaces for the residential area back? Will those be marked or something?
It is, and let me ask Mr. Costabile 2 questions, and then I'll answer your question if you could give him the mic. Mr. Costabile,
Yes.
how long have you owned, you can sit down.
Okay.
You've owned the...
Following you.
Yeah, you've owned the building now for the last year and a half, is that correct?
Yes,
And you have, as I indicated, 4 apartments there, correct?
I do. Yes.
Okay, and how many cars are generated at the present time from those 4 apartments?
2.
2, okay. So all of and the apartments are fully occupied?
They are fully occupied, yes.
Okay, and only two of the residents have cars, the rest of them don't?
Yes, there's professors at Princeton University that take the bus right at the corner, and students. So there's only 2 residents with 2 cars total.
Okay, and the reason I'm saying that, if we're required to have 8 for the residential, if you mark out 8 spots and there's only 2 people using them, then people that are coming to the restaurant don't feel that they can use those spaces if we delineate them. At this juncture, I think, given that there's only 2 residences that need parking spaces, it's better to leave everything undelineated rather than to say, okay, we've got 8 required parking spaces for the apartments, and there's only 2 cars there, so we're proposing to leave them undelineated. They'll park in the parking lot. Right now, there's only basically 8 parking spaces between everything that's there and undelineated gravel and undelineated spots. I mean, when we're all done, we're going to have 21 parking spaces. I mean, it may be that it makes sense to have 2 of them delineated for the 2 residents that live there. If that becomes a problem, I guess we could do that. But you know, the feeling is that from the owner that there's really no need to delineate the 2 parking spaces for the 2 residents that have cars, and they can park anywhere within the lot.
What kind of signage are you going to have? I mean, in the sense that, how does the general public know, well, that parking is tied to that restaurant back there? It's a little easier if you're the only way into the parking lot is from 27, which is beside the restaurant. But if you were in and out on Laurel Avenue, how does anybody know to go there and park?
Well, it's all, we can put signage up. I don't think it's necessary, because again, this will all, originally there was parking spaces here and a fence. This is all going to be an open area, and it's going to be empty parking spaces. And if people are going there and they need a place to park, they're going to park. If you think a restaurant parking sign is appropriate, we can obviously put one up there.
Oh, I'm just asking, if I'm driving down 27 and I'm looking for that restaurant, how am I to know where the parking is?
Well, you'd come in through our driveway, and
I can come in off 27 as we're now discussing,
right.
but I wouldn't have that visibility if it were in and out of Laurel Avenue. So I guess that changing that is a little bit of a benefit for you.
I'm not following you, Mr. Thomas, I'm
How do
sorry.
I know to go to Laurel Avenue to park in that lot for your restaurant?
Those lots are open lots. I mean, once you enter the site from Route 27, our street address is Route 27. The restaurant street address is not Laurel
I
Avenue.
think it's an improvement in a sense that you can enter from 27, because that will put you in a parking lot by the restaurant. I'm wondering if the benefit might be reduced a little bit depending on how many people will be able to effectively make the left turns from the other direction to go into. But that's, I guess, not our issue.
Yeah.
And the restaurant will have a full rear entrance, I'm assuming, from the parking.
The restaurant will have an entrance from the rear. That is correct.
And there'll be some kind of guidance for people that'll
Yes.
be, you have them parking in a few different places, you know.
We
I would think you need some kind of a sign. or
could
direction.
definitely put signage indicating that the parking spaces by the apartment building are also restaurant parking spaces. And I also think if we're going to be using the 10 parking spaces next door, that we should sign those to say additional parking and have those delineated next door. So that signage can be put on the plan.
Right, that brings up another quick question. Do we have to decide if the 10 spots next door have any effect on that business? That they can afford to give up 10? Is it just officially touch the base? At
Well,
least?
I mean, those spaces are they going to be dedicated only to this use or just available in case?
They're just going to be available. And as I stated earlier, Mr. Thomas, this is one of probably the biggest parking lots around. Many years ago, I did a development application to the rear of that property for an office building of about 15 or 18,000 square feet, which was never built. And when we did the parking calculations for the restaurant and for the office building, between the two of them, there was still enough parking for both uses. So there's more than adequate parking behind the neighboring restaurant for those 10 spaces.
That's fine, I just want to hear you say it. So
Yeah,
Okay.
that's-
As I indicated before, that parking lot is huge. I can't imagine it'd be a parking crunch.
And if the board is interested in incorporating those 10 additional spots, when you vote on this application, A1 that was marked today just indicates that today, the owner is okay with that parking. You should require the lease to be made a part of it and an easement as well.
I do already have a signed lease, which I can obviously provide as a condition of approval. I have not prepared the easements yet because I think that was premature to do that, but I do have a signed lease, which I will be glad to provide. Mr. Let me just get to Camila, with respect to the D variance, the reason we're here well, originally we were here for the D variance because of the apartment above the restaurant that's now gone. So the only D variance that we are seeking would be the use of the parking lot that was solely for the residential use now, will also be used for the restaurant, which in essence is a diminution of the existing D variance. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you've heard the testimony of Mr. Costabile concerning the fact that there's only 2 cars, and you've also heard the testimony of Mr. Costabile and the document that I put into evidence that we have, in fact, the ability to use additional parking on the adjoining property. Do you have an opinion as to whether the use of the residential property for additional parking would in any way diminish those 4 apartment units?
No, I don't see any kind of diminishment. Also, the other factor to consider is the fact that the existing building is not being expanded at all. Often with a D variance, it would be related to an expansion of a building size, and that would create an intense in use of the site. Whereas I think in this case, that increase in intense will not occur.
Okay, and in essence, there are currently 8 spaces that are attributable to the residential use, and in reality, with the shared parking, they have the 21 spaces to use, plus conceivably even the 10 additional spaces on the adjoining property. So they actually have more available parking to them than they currently do have, is that correct?
That is correct.
Wait, can you explain again, what is the D1 variance for?
The use of the parking lot is not for the building,
Why is it not for the building?
because the building exists.
Was it ever approved for a four-unit apartment?
What relevance does that have?
It's never been legally approved. It's not a permitted use. A four-unit building is not a permitted use in a neighborhood business zone.
Yeah, and
So was it ever formally approved?
it's,
I thought that's what you were before this board for.
we never applied for a use variance for, what we would have had to apply for is a certification of a pre-existing non-conforming use or a use variance. The building exists. We're not expanding the building. We are using that property for parking purposes. For the discussion before the board this evening is the fact that there is an existing building there. I am not asking for certification of a pre-existing non-conforming use or a use variance for that building.
Do we know how it came into existence? And when it came into existence?
1920.
It did.
Your tax office,
Report for months. This is the very first time I'm hearing this. I believe your initial application asked for a D1 use variance because four-unit
No.
apartment building.
no, it did not.
Somehow this is related to a diminution because parking, honestly, I'm not sure I don't understand what the D1 use variance is for. I still don't.
The part of the of the lot that is a residential use has parking now that is going to be used for the restaurant. So therefore, in essence, there's a technical diminution on that lot. And I will put as A2 in evidence the search from your tax office, which indicates that this building was built in 1920. So I will have that marked A2.
The future, I would, if something's been in my report for 4 months, it would be a good thing to call me and ask me, why are you asking for a D1 use variance? My report says it's because residential uses are not permitted in the NB zone. And I ask questions about, when it came into existence. And you're dealing with this before the board right now for the first time.
Mr. Healy, that report was
And this
issued.
concept about this parking is the very first time I'm hearing.
Mr. Healy, that report was issued when there was an apartment above the restaurant. My interpretation in reading the report all along was that it was referenced to that apartment. That building exists. We're not
We
changing
have
it.
situations exist all over town. That doesn't make them legal. That's why I asked. This, for all I know, for all I know, I don't know the history of this site. For all I know, that was a one-family house forever, and 5 years ago it was converted. I don't know. That's why I asked the question.
And if we submitted to you a certification that it's a four-family house, if there was a concern, and that was part of our submission that you asked me to submit, if you want me to put that into evidence, did you get that?
I don't know how you misinterpreted it. I said applicant seeks use variance for the 4-unit residential building on lot 14. I'm not sure how you misinterpreted that.
Let me put into evidence so we don't have any dispute. I can find it. I'd like to mark as A3 a certification that I submitted to the township dated April 26, signed by Mr. Costabile, indicating that this was a four-family dwelling. I submitted that for the purpose because when we had a discussion, Mr. Healy, about how we calculate the parking, which was the discussion we did have, you indicated how many units were in there, and you asked,
I asked for floor plans.
yes.
To confirm what exists, because again, at that point, the plans were all over the place in terms of seats and
Correct.
what was upstairs, so I asked for floor plans. That was provided and I basically accepted that, but your applicant said it is a 4-unit building.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, so that doesn't mean it's legal.
And
Again, as I said, that could have, not saying it has been, could have been converted 2 years ago. That's why I asked, when was it constructed? When was it converted? Was it before zoning came into effect? Or was it permitted in the zoning at that time? That's why I asked those questions, because I thought you were asking for a D1 use variance.
I wasn't, and I didn't fill out an application for a D1 use variance for that building. If you looked at my application, there was no reference to that building for a D1 use variance.
It's been in my report for about 4 months.
Well.
Should have asked. Why I was asking those questions.
But the bottom line is, it is what it is, and parking is based on what's there. If you feel that there's a nonconformity, you have the zoning inspector, I'm sure she's familiar on how to get to Kingston, because she's been there on a fairly regular basis. She can go and check the building, and if there's a concern, issue a violation.
That's not my point.
But there is no reason to ask for a use variance for that building. That's my point. The building is there.
So you should,
I think I disagree with you. If it's a non-conforming use in the zone, there are 2 options. Either a certificate of pre-existing non-conforming use or a use variance application. And you're not asking for use variance approval for a 4-family use in this zone. You're also not asking for a certificate of non-conforming
No.
use.
and that's why I asked, when did it come to be? Was it before zoning? Then you could have asked
Mr.
for.
Keneally, I disagree. The building is there.
I understand, but that doesn't make it legal.
For the purpose of a site plan, it's an existing building, whether it's legal or not. My client can elect to come in for a certification of a pre-existing non-conforming use. I didn't represent him when he purchased the property. When he purchased it, he didn't do that, but he purchased the property as a 4-story building. It exists unless something calls it into question. He has a right to keep that building there. If the township feels it's illegal for some reason, they can issue him a violation notice. For the purpose of this application, we're using that site solely for parking. Now, if there were 10 apartments in there, then obviously the parking requirement would be greater. He signed a certification saying that there's only 4, and that's what we're basing it on. If there's 10, he's then filed a false certification, which may make this whole application a nullity. If it's only a 1-family building that it was ever approved for, then we would have less parking requirements than what we're stating we need for the building. So all we're talking about on that site is parking, not use.
But we're now aware of a 4-unit building in a zone that doesn't permit it.
That's been there since 1920.
We don't know that.
Yes, we do. Your tax office has it carried as a building since 1920.
The tax office doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean that it's been there since 1920. That means that somebody went out there when they assessed it, and when they went out there, it existed at that time.
Yeah, correct.
That doesn't say it's been there since 1920.
And
It's been continually used as a 4-family since 1920.
Mr. Healy, does everybody that has non-conforming buildings have an affirmative obligation to apply for a certification or a use variance? No.
You're before this board for a site plan approval, and actually you did submit an application for a D variance, and I'm looking through to see exactly what you applied for, but you did make application
Yeah.
for a D variance.
I did. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And it goes not to the building, but to the use of the parcel. If I was going to take that parking lot and subdivide it and add it to the restaurant lot, would I need a D variance because that's an expansion of a non-conforming use? Yes.
So what type of, so it's related to the fact that you're using some of the existing parking because you're sharing it for the restaurant. What type of D variance then does that
I
trigger?
think that's a D5, if I'm not mistaken. It's not a D1. I didn't ask for a D1.
So a D2 would be expansion of a non-conforming use.
Right,
You're not
then it
asking
would be
for
a-
that. A D5 is, I believe, is density. So
And that would be a D2, because it would be to some degree, the same thing, if I were to subdivide that lot in half, I would need a D2, correct?
yes.
Okay, and what I'm saying is I'm using part of that lot for the restaurant, so that would be a D2.
Well,
The
maybe
D1
a
would,
D2, or if the use was, yeah, I guess you could be asking for a D2.
yes.
Would you agree, Mr. Keneally, that that'd be a D2?
By D2, do you mean an expansion of a
Expansion of a
non-conforming use?
non-conforming use?
I think you have to prove that it's a non-conforming use before you can apply for an expansion of a non-conforming use.
What does that mean in terms of what they're applying for now?
Well, and that's, I would have expected that in this situation, you would either get proofs that this pre-existed the adoption of your zoning board ordinances, or we would get some testimony to justify the 4 residential unit. Because under your theory, if the board votes in the affirmative, you get a site plan approval, you get some kind of a D variance to use the parking for the restaurant, and you still have a 4-unit building that's not legal.
We don't know that.
And you're here before the zoning board, so why not legalize it?
I mean, unfortunately, I don't think the board has the jurisdiction to do it right now, because I didn't ask for it, and I think it would be outside their jurisdiction, nor did I present the proofs to justify it. But as to whether it's a non-conforming use, on its face, it's a non-conforming use. It's a 4-family in a residential zone.
That doesn't make it a non-conforming use under the land use law, because that's the definition of a non-conforming use under the land use law means it was legal at some time before the adoption of the zoning board, the zoning ordinances that made it illegal.
Well, let me, I have good news and bad news, Mr. Lanford. The good news is, in your notice, you asked for Schedule 1 permitted uses, residential uses are not permitted in the MB zone.
Right. I mean,
So you notified for it. So are you asking for a D1 or not?
if the board wants to grant me the D1, I can, again, and to be completely honest with you, Mr. Healy, I could tell you it was built in 1920. I can have testimony from my client that is, to his knowledge, in at least the last 28 years, it's been a 4-family dwelling. Can I take it back to 1959 as of this very moment? No.
Well, I don't think you have to. If you're asking for a D1 use variance, I think that's,
Well, I'd have to take it back if I was asking for a certification. If I'm asking for a D1, I can
asking for a
present.
D1, you need to present testimony from a planner indicating that it's particularly suitable for the zone, et cetera, et cetera.
I could do that too. All right, let me recall it. I still don't think that was part of what I was seeking, but if,
That's what you noticed for.
well, that was because, again, we originally had the apartment, which was a D1 variance. All right, Mr. Costabile,
Yes,
you purchased this building a year and a half ago, correct?
correct, yes, sir.
And where do you live?
I live in Kingston,
Okay, how far from this property?
about 3 blocks.
And how familiar are you with the property?
My younger daughter, which is 31 years old, her best friend used to live there when she was 8 years old.
So you've been familiar with this property for the last 25, 30 years?
Yes,
Okay. And to your knowledge, has it always been a 4-family dwelling?
yes.
Okay. How is access to the apartments?
I'm sorry?
How do you get to the apartments?
Through Laurel Avenue.
But no, I mean the building. There's 3 doors on the building.
There is 2 apartments downstairs and 2 upstairs, divided by a stairway.
Okay. And to get access to the apartments, if you looked at the aerials, there's 3 doors in the parking lot. The doors on either side, where do they go? To downstairs apartments or upstairs
Yeah,
apartments?
2 doors on the either side. One is for each apartment, and the door in the middle access the 2 upstairs apartment.
Okay. And you've been through the apartments and all the time that you've owned the apartments and even before then?
Yes,
Okay. And to your knowledge, they've always been 4 families?
yes.
Okay. And the way the building is set up and configured, was it
Was
configured?
2 families. 2 bedrooms.
But four units?
4 units, 2 bedrooms each, yes.
Okay. And they were always that way in the way the building is configured? Could it have been converted from a single-family house to 4 apartments?
At least since 91, since I moved in town, yes.
Right. Okay. I would, just to clarify the record then, I would amend the application. Again, when I filled out the application, I was referencing the other building, but I will include my request to have the site plan and the D1 variance granted for this building. I would ask Mr. Mielek Mr. Mealy, again, you're familiar with the dwelling, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and although the property is in a business district, all of the other properties that are in the business district surrounding this all front and have access to Route 27?
That is correct.
Okay, and this property does not have any access to Route 27, nor does it have any frontage to Route 27, correct?
That's correct.
And from looking at the property and looking at the surrounding area, is it most appropriate for this property to continue as a residential use as opposed to having that property converted to some sort of a business use?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and as you testified earlier, the property adjacent to this property is a residential use?
Yes,
And all the properties across the street from the property are residential uses, is that correct?
yes, it is.
And would it be a detriment if this property were to be converted to a non-residential use, in your opinion?
I don't see any detriment to it.
To keeping it the way it is?
Correct.
And would it have an adverse effect if, in fact, it was some sort of a commercial use?
I think it's probably better suited as a residential.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
So, for the record, and again, I think this helps you, because I think you forgot what you put on your original application. On your original application for the D variance, you wrote, application is for use variance and preliminary and final site plan to convert an existing building and dwelling to a restaurant. There are residential uses that will remain on the property. Residential uses, so we're not talking about one apartment, we're talking about residential uses are not permitted in the NB zone. And on another page, both residential uses are existing conditions. Applicant is seeking to have the residences ratified as part of this application. So, as far as the record is concerned, that's what you applied for.
Okay.
That's what you know. I'm just making sure that's on the record, so this isn't some use variance that just popped up out of nowhere. So it's not, in my opinion, I don't believe it's a notice issue.
I don't think it's...
Let me finish. You put that on your original application. You notified, you put that in your notice, and it's been in my report that it needed a D1 use variance. So I think the record throughout, I think it got confused during the hearing tonight, but as far as I'm concerned, the application was for the D1 use variance for that.
And to the extent that I may have caused the confusion, I apologize, but when I looked at it, and quite frankly, this application, if I remember correctly, was filed
February.
in February, and we've had so many discussions regarding this application, and most of them didn't focus on the four apartments, but focused on the restaurant and the apartment above the restaurant. And that's where my focus was in dealing with that issue.
So, yeah, my point being is, if any member of the public was interested in this issue, they would have saw here that
Correct.
that's what you're applying for. It was noticed for that, and it was indicated in my report.
I have no further questions of Mr. Mealy.
Any board questions? Yes, it's traffic.
Sound like you're disappointed, Mr. Chairman.
You swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth.
Yes, I do.
Name and address, please.
Elizabeth Dolan, Dolan, 181 West High Street in Somerville, New Jersey.
Ms. Dolan, what is your occupation?
I'm a licensed engineer, and I practice in the areas of traffic and
It's
transportation
okay,
engineering.
just move
Okay.
forward.
Thank you. My license is still in good standing.
All right, Ms. Dolan, you prepared a report dated February 20th, 2018, which was submitted in conjunction with this application.
Yes, a brief letter report.
Right, and you've been here this evening and are familiar with the plan and some of the modifications that have been discussed this
Yes.
evening
Yes.
concerning ingresses and egress and removal of a couple parking spaces.
Yes.
Without spending a lot of time, because I don't think the board wants to hear it all, based on what we've presented this evening, can you indicate how the circulation pattern would work, again, if we reached agreement with the county to have the one-way driveway on Laurel?
If the driveway on Laurel is made one way in the outbound direction, I don't see any detriment to the site circulation or access Overall, this is a relatively low traffic volume generator, even the combination of the 4 apartments, the restaurant, and the market. It's a high-quality restaurant, open later at night, reservation only. That's a nominal traffic generator, and the apartments aren't generating much traffic with 2 vehicles, but even if they did have 5 or 6 vehicles, again, it would be a small amount of traffic. So the site circulation already includes a one-way ingress from the state highway from Route 27. We've shared the plans with NJDOT. We've shared the trip generation calculations with DOT. They issued the letter of no interest. They recognize that it's a relatively quiet site in terms of traffic. And the provision of parking in close proximity to this restaurant, I think, is a bonus. We've got the 10 spaces next door. Nobody's mentioned the on-street parking that's available as well. So that's to further support the restaurant customers.
With respect to the restaurant, what are going to be the trip generations during peak hour?
That's a maximum of 22 trips in the busiest hour.
Okay, and those are not peak hours, they're the busiest hour of the...
That's like a Saturday night.
Right,
Yeah.
which is not the peak hour on Route 27.
Not the peak hour of the roadway. It's after the residents come home, and it's after the market is closed, as the applicant stated.
Okay, now, with respect to the width of the driveway, which is in nonconformance with the ordinance, the entrance driveway, do you have an opinion as to whether that is of sufficient width to handle one-way traffic going into the site?
It is. It has been accommodating that traffic, and certainly can accommodate the nominal increase in driveway volumes. But yes, it's wide enough to accommodate passenger vehicles.
Okay. One other issue that we had a discussion about, obviously, all of our parking is to the rear of the property. Our handicap access is through the market, which is at the front of the property. There is street parking along Route 27, is there not?
Yes, there is.
And is there an ability, if the municipality or this board recommends to the governing body, to get a handicap spot on Route 27, which would not only service this site, but also other businesses on Route 27?
Yes, that could be accomplished. I believe the board would have to pass, or the municipality would have to pass an ordinance for that space, and then obtain an occupancy permit from the regional DOT office to physically paint the emblem and install the appropriate signage.
So if the board felt it was appropriate to have a handicap spot on 27, they can incorporate that in their resolution, then it would have to go to the governing body?
Yes.
Okay, and in discussions with DOT, generally, are these types of permits fairly routinely granted?
Yes.
So, okay. And do you feel that the circulation to the rear of the property would be benefited for people coming to the restaurant by posting some additional signage at the rear of the property to make them understand that they do have the availability of parking by the residences, or the residential building, and also some signage directing them for overflow parking to the restaurant next door?
I think those are definitely good ideas, because the signage guiding you to additional parking at the restaurant lets the patrons know that they're allowed to park in that enormous parking lot next door, and also some signage that lets them know that they can park opposite that residential building. I think that makes sense.
Okay, and then Mr. Mielek, in talking about going from a two-way to a one-way driveway, suggested that we take out one additional parking space and widen the connection between our site and the restaurant next door. Does that make sense in your opinion?
It does make sense. With the 10 spaces from next door, we take care of satisfy the parking requirement. So I think in the goal of providing better circulation between these two properties, losing one additional space isn't going to present a hardship.
Okay, and then in conclusion, you feel that with all of the spaces, we have adequate parking, adequate on-site circulation, provided we provide the signage and sufficient methods of ingress and egress to the site?
Yes, ample circulation, ample parking, and again, we haven't taken credit for the street parking or the shared parking between the residential area and the restaurant area.
Okay, and I think there was one thing that we talked about, and Mr. Mielek, there were some requests to clean up the Laurel Avenue driveway so that there's adequate site visibility by removing some shrubbery and some
And
fencing.
the fence will be relocated, yes, so we'll be providing clear lines of sight. That's a big improvement over the existing condition, because that fence is right up against the sidewalk.
So that will be accomplished, and then there will be adequate sight distances exiting on Laurel Avenue, and obviously the existing driveway to the restaurant to the south of us has adequate circulation and sight distance. That's been there for many, many
For
years.
many years, and yes, to answer the first part of the question, we will clear the line of sight, so we'll have appropriate sight lines in either direction on Laurel Avenue.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Anybody else?
Is there current signage on 27 going into the driveway for the or
Now, that was a law office. They had no signage. As part of what we are proposing, and it's on the plan, are two small signs, one in the front and one in the back, which will designate this as being a restaurant. So there will be a sign that people will know it's a restaurant, and the driver will be there. And just for the record, we did appear before the Historic Commission to review all of this, and they approved the connection as well as the proposed signage, which would be conforming signage.
Any others?
Let me just, if you had a wheelchair and you were parked off of in the back, could you get into the market from the back? No.
No,
way.
you'd have to come to the
It's all off of 27
front.
for that, yeah. Okay. So it would make sense to have
To
a
have a handicap,
space.
sure, and then the
Yeah.
other retailers could use it as well.
They could all use it, yeah.
Sure.
That actually would help other people as well.
I think so.
I think it's also a valid idea to have, to put the handicap request in the resolution. Even though there is some on-street parking, it's very limited. I'm sure there's no accommodation for any handicap parking on that street. And again, it's going to benefit your client, but it should benefit other people or handicapped people that might want to visit another spot, because there isn't anything there. And there aren't that many spots. I guess the complaint will be that that will be empty, but maybe more than it'll be full, and someone won't be able to park, but I guess that's tough luck.
Exactly.
Any other
Also, Mr. Thomas, just the other two businesses do have some parking in the back too, so it's not that those businesses are devoid of parking, so I think the one spot sort of does make sense.
They don't have much next, at the marketplace in the corner,
There's not a lot of parking, but there is some, but again, if you're handicapped, you still got to get out to the front.
yeah, that's right.
The two,
And there's steps there, and
the
it's
two,
making all kinds
two
of problems.
businesses on the corner next to where you're talking about, the best description might be that they barely function in terms of parking. So I wouldn't use them as an example.
What
I
I'm
think
saying,
this is a better setup, and I'm glad you're widening the access back there, because you are mixing pedestrians and cars. You know, may not be a lot. This application, I think, can work because it is small numbers. It's not. Hopefully, you're doing it, like you said, by reservation, so you're not going to be attracting people, just drive-by people off the street.
we're not a pizza parlor, trust me.
How,
It's a lot of imagination's gone into this application, and it's amazing.
how
Any
is
other
handicap
questions?
access, how is handicap access provided at all to the restaurant, though? I mean, there's steps in the front and there's steps in the back.
There is no handicap access. The seats in the market would be the ones that are going to be used for individuals who are handicapped.
Oh, okay. So if, okay, I was under the impression that the restaurants, when the restaurant's being operated, that the deli was basically going to be closed.
It will be, those seating, they can sit there for the restaurant. They're not going to be able to sit there for a sandwich, but if somebody is handicapped and wants dinner, they can have.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, well, if there's no other testimony, right,
There is no other testimony.
open to the public, and I'll make a note that there does not appear to be any public, so we'll move on. You have anything to say?
Just very briefly, I think Mr. McCracken sort of hit the nail on the head. There was great pains in trying to figure all of this out with the 3 sites. Part of it was input from, quite frankly, the Historic Commission was very involved in it. Township staff was very involved in it. The fact that Mr. Costabile was able to acquire all 3 properties also was very important to make this all function. I think what we've been able to accomplish, first of all, the restaurant is permitted. The question was, how do we handle the parking? And I think because of the work that was done by him, by staff, we were able to come up with a parking plan, and with the help of the neighbor to accommodate parking for this use. I do apologize for the confusion regarding that building. The way I interpreted it was different than the way Mr. Healy did, but anyway, we got to the finish line on that, hopefully. So I do think that if those of you who remember before the market was there was basically an empty building sitting there for many, many years. He sort of really did a nice job of revitalizing this building. And I think having this restaurant here, I think, Mr. Thomas, you and I have had conversations, and some other board members, that what this town lacks are good restaurants. I've heard you say that many times, so I think we're going to at least now have another good restaurant, and which I think will be a plus to the community, and I don't think we'll create any problems with respect to parking. So I would respectfully request that the site plan be granted along with the D variances and the bulk variances.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion and any discussion.
Well, I'm just going to I move that we approve the application, you know, with all of what we've talked about in place. And that I don't think there's anything that needs to be done other than the Canal Commission, after it's all done, sends their approval.
Well, yeah, there's staff reports, and the applicant will have to
Yeah.
address whatever is in the staff
In the
reports.
staff
and
reports,
obviously
yeah.
whatever else they discussed before you tonight.
Yeah.
That'll be reflected in the resolution.
And we need county approval too, Mr.
Yeah,
McCracken.
well,
So we still have
for
outside.
the county has to approve it, okay.
Yeah, and I mentioned the staff reports because there's a kind of a checklist of the outside approval, so that'll
Yeah.
be part of the staff reports.
So we're moving 2 variances, one for the house parking lot, that the part of the lot that's being used for parking, and we're recommending a handicap space be established on Route 27 also.
I think that as far as the changes to the variances tonight, the one was with respect to the impervious. They're going to make some kind of trade-off between the 2 sites, so it's offset because of the need for the delivery. And then the other one was the parking. 23 is required, and now it's going to be 20 instead of 21.
That's correct.
To improve that vehicular situation.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Poll the board.
Bruce McCracken,
4.
Anthony Caldwell,
Yes.
Gary Rosenthal,
Yes.
Joel Reese, Chairman Thomas.
I forgot to ask if you even wanted to have the vote. Because I'm still left, I didn't vote yet.
I would have said something if I didn't want to have the vote, Mr. Chairman, trust me.
I'm sure you would have, and I vote yes, and good luck with it. And then we'll have a motion to close, hopefully. And a second,
Second.
meeting
It's a
adjourned.
real excellence here. Huh?
I hope he